from now on. A very warm welcome at the AI Education webinar of the European Consortium of Innovative Universities. So ECIU is a network of 13 young universities in Europe and in Mexico, collaborating together for nearly 30 years, building a European university, ECIU University, and eager to reflect on fast developing technologies such as AI in education. If there is one word that defines the current state of Gen AI in universities, it's implementation. So we have the guidelines, we have the declarations, we have the values, but we are still searching for the practical operational roadmaps to make those values work on the ground. So this is what we saw reflected in the questions you sent in beforehand, and it's also exactly what today's webinar is about. We are bringing together three critical pillars of the European higher education landscape. So if I could please ask you to mute your microphone because we hear some background noise. Maybe you can also help me to mute the microphones that are causing this noise. Thank you. So we will present to you the innovative policy insights of the ECIU Clarinet group consisting of experts in the field of AI in education, and those will be presented by the Clarinet chair, Monica Ward from Dublin City University. And then we will move to the more systemic foresight of the European Universities Association, which will be presented by Thomas Jorgensen, the Director of Policy Coordination and Foresight. And then we will also have the essential perspective of the learners themselves through the European Student Union, presented by Bianca Parr, a student in law in Malta. So here you see the program on your screen. But as said, before we start, we will make a screenshot to capture the nice atmosphere and to show you're with us today. So please make sure your camera is on and smile at the camera. And then my colleague Vanessa will make a screenshot of all of you. So thank you so much. Vanessa, did that work for you? Maybe one more smile. Yes, it worked. You have it captured. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Good. Then, without any further ado, I will give the floor to Monica Ward, the chair of the Clarinet Group, to guide us through the ECIU policy paper on AI in education. Monica, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let's get my slides. Are you seeing them okay, Olga?
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming along to this. So this is a kind of a summary of our paper. So Clarinet comes from the collective of artificial intelligence in education, because it's very mouthful saying ECIU AI in Education Expert Group. Okay, so this is an overview of the paper if you haven't had a chance to read it. Sorry. So we have the executive summary, motivation. So we were looking at the principles across all the universities in the ECIU network. And it's interesting to see kind of the commonalities and the slight differences that we had. We also have Section 5 national pathways. So we have France, Ireland, Sweden, Portugal, and the Netherlands. We are 12, 13 different universities. I could have picked from other countries. We picked these ones, and I'll explain a little bit later in the presentation why so. But every country has similarities, and there are also differences. And then perhaps the more interesting section of the paper is the next steps and future developments, because kind of we know where we are, what's going to happen next, what are we working at the moment. So I think it's good kind of to share these ideas, and sort of others can see where they are in relation to that. So if we, sorry, just move this here. So if you didn't have time to read the paper, what we are looking at is obviously AI in education. It's present in many aspects of education. And as Olga has alluded to, but we don't lack principles. We all know what we should be doing. But the issue is, how do you translate them into practice? How do you get them in the ground, not only in terms of assessment, but also teaching and learning, and maybe other aspects of the university? So this papers are kind of a policy-oriented contribution from our the ECIU in relation to AI in education, and we'd be interested to hear, does this reflect the situation in your university, in your network? What's interesting to you? What other areas maybe have we missed? So that would be interesting. So across the network, we looked at each institution. So each institution is represented in the Clarinet group. And we said, so what are your institutional guidelines on AI? And these were the common threads throughout. I'm sure if I got you to sit down with a pen and paper and ask you to come up with 8 features of institutional guidelines, you would probably come up with these, and I'll speak about them in a minute. So obviously we've got ethics, we've the legal and data protection issues, we've freedom and autonomy that exists in higher education, the importance of human oversight, which is a key feature of AI in education in the EU, the importance of pedagogical integration, not just, hey, it's there, go and use it. There has to be a pedagogical basis for it. There's also a particular focus on assessment and academic integrity, and this obviously was in the first wave of AI in education that everybody was rabbit in the headlights. What are we doing with assessment? Equity and inclusion is really important. So a lot of the gains that we've made with digital technologies, we don't want to see them evaporate with AI, which is mainly text-based at the moment, although that is changing. And then the issue of sustainability. So if we look at, in terms of ethics and responsible use, so key themes that emerge there are academic integrity, critical thinking. If I had to summarize everything that people say on AI in education, if I had to pick one phrase, it would be critical thinking. It's the thing that really keeps us human-centered. It's the bit that's really important. Reflectivity, so to stop a moment and think about what we're doing and why we're using it. I meet with colleagues internationally on AI in education, and it's always interesting to me to see the difference between different parts of the world, and that element of human oversight comes through when we're talking to European colleagues and less so in other jurisdictions. Obviously, the issue of transparency of how it is used and critical evaluation is really important. In terms of pedagogical integration, we can use AI as a support tool. Okay, so it's not to outsource learning, it's not to outsource teaching, but it's a support tool to enhance what we already are doing. We will have to adopt our teaching methods to, at least acknowledge its existence and what are we doing with it. So at all times, we should be trying to leverage it where it's beneficial and not use it where it's not beneficial. Obviously, AI in education fits into a broader kind of conversation of digital literacy, but it should be woven in there. And the DigComp framework acknowledges that it's woven into the DigComp 3.0 framework. This is the bit where a lot of people in academia kind of want to close their eyes and kind of not think about too much. The legal and data protection, it is very complex. There are copyright and authorship issues that AI tools initially didn't address and are starting to address. The issue of data privacy. The number of people I've heard saying, oh, I put my CV in and I got it to change it up, or they're putting in stuff that they shouldn't really be putting into AI tools. And you go, oh, don't do that, please. And then at a more kind of a senior management, there's issues of compliance and regulation. So there's a lot of regulation out there. And just because it's complex doesn't mean that you shouldn't be complying with it. You are probably quite bored at this stage of listening to assessment and academic integrity issues, and we're happy to address some questions on that. But the main thing is you have to redefine assessment. What are you actually assessing? So some people who are again, a lot of this is discipline specific, but in some disciplines, the essay is the cornerstone of how they assess people. And there's a need to be aware of what AI can do and kind of redesign your assessment. At all times, the human judgment is key in assessing academic misconduct. So we're in the EU, AI is, our higher education is defined as a high risk activity, particularly in terms of assessment and admission. And so there always has to be human oversight. And then there was a kind of a collection of things that we labeled as additional considerations. So obviously, there's academic freedom and institutional autonomy. So academics depending on their context, have more or less freedom deciding how they're doing assessment. Yes, it's fine for them to have that freedom, but they must be doing something that is AI aware. I've mentioned equity and inclusion. We don't want to lose any of the gains that we've made. Again, reiterating the importance of human oversight, and then also sustainable pedagogy. And here we're talking about two different things. We're talking about the environmental, so the water usage, the carbon footprint of developing the AI modules, using the AI models, and also the economic sustainability. Universities generally aren't awash with cash. And what happens when if you have an institutional license, but it gets more and more expensive. So these are all issues that we should be thinking about. So we came up with these 6 principles. I'd say if your institution or organization has something very similar. So, ethics is really important, assessment, proper assessment, the role of the educator, student responsibility, that they have responsibility for anything that they submit as part of their own work. The issue of data protection is really important, and AI literacy. And I'll mention this a little bit later on. When I talk about AI in education, something that I'm very keen to constantly reinforce is that each discipline is impacted in a different way. So yes, there's general stuff that applies to everybody, but then within specific disciplines, there's things to consider. So for example, and I could have picked any other discipline out there, I just picked 4. Why didn't you pick my one? Because I didn't have time. So in terms of chemistry, chemistry is one of the ones that's been really positively impacted by AI. They can generate new compounds that would be really dangerous to do in the lab. We can use VR tools to upskill students to the lab things that they have to do, put on their gloves, hairnets, coats, whatever they have to do. So it has a really positive impact in chemistry, and it makes things a lot safer. If you look at media, on the other hand, it almost creates an existential crisis for them because AI can generate text, videos, things that AI could do. On the surface, it can do this, but when we look under the hood, maybe it's slightly different. If you look at nursing, nursing is a real human-centered occupation. And yes, there are elements where it can come in, but we still need nurses to help us, take our blood pressure, change our wound dressings and all of that. So that's probably slightly less impacted. And then if you take computing, which is my own discipline, we are impacted like everybody else in terms of assessments, but we also are impacted by the fact that AI tools can generate code. Is it good quality or not? Slightly different conversation, but also the computing students will be the ones that are developing the AI tools, tailoring them and whatever. So for examples, I could have picked 4 other disciplines, but it's really important to acknowledge the discipline difference. In the paper, we outlined 5 national pathways. France is interesting because they got Mistral AI, which is one of the few European-based ones. And I know at high level within Europe, it's really keen that we have European tools in this regard. In Ireland, we have national guidelines for Gen AI in higher education. They've been based on kind of a consultancy process nationally, which has been very helpful. In Sweden, they are looking at sovereign research, pedagogical reform, and strict governance. And it's interesting when you read the national guidelines in each country, they're all, well, we can be a leader at European level, and oh, we can be a European leader. So that's quite interesting. In Portugal, they are looking at 4 different elements. So they're looking at infrastructure and data, innovation and adoption, talent and skills, and responsibility and ethics. So you can see a lot of the common themes coming through here, just kind of slightly a different perspective. And in the Netherlands, they have the AI Go framework for AI literacy in education. So this is a national resource that educators can use. So in terms, if you look at the national pathways, there's various reference. So some countries have it reference to education in different documents. Some have one specifically for education, but they all are aware of the EU AI Act, too many vowels there, GDPR concerned, and the need to have a human-centered focus. As I say, there's variation on where that focus is, but actually very few have a standalone, publicly available AI policy. Every time I meet people, I ask, does your university have an AI policy? And they say yes, but it's actually, there's a bit about AI woven into some other policy, or it's in guidelines, or it's position paper. But this is understandable because senior management are not experts in AI, and they're always afraid of being first mover and making mistakes. So in terms of next step, and Olga, I'm watching the time, so don't worry. So there's kind of three aspects that we should kind of keep in mind. So knowing about AI, so we need to have a common understanding about it. We need to have AI literacy, and we need to have kind of an ethical awareness. In terms of working with AI, and Olga alluded to this, the fact that we need to focus on the practical implementation of AI. Yes, we have these guidelines, but how does this translate into how we teach and educate our students? How do our students learn? How do we do assessment in an AI-infused area? And then without AI, there's only certain things that AI can do, or maybe should be allowed to do. And we do need that AI-free space, again, that human-centered element. And just to note, a lot of people at the moment use these free versions, but they're free in inverted commas because your data is being used for training and other purposes. And if we really look at the kind of IP and data protection compliance issues, there's a hidden cost there that I think will become more apparent in the near future. In terms of future trajectories, the low level is that we decide that it was an expensive time, and 10 years' time, we might look back and say, are we mad? Imagine we were using AI to do this. What were we thinking? Regional level integration, probably where we might land. It's used for some things, but not used for everything. And then high level integration, it's used kind of extensively. Not there yet. But regardless which scenario plays out, universities, we have to promote appropriate methodologies for teaching and evaluation. So the current focus within ECIU is in AI literacy. People say staff and students, but within staff, we've got academics. We've also got professional staff, and we've got to think of maybe specialized AI literacy for senior management and leaders, so they are aware of kind of at a policy level as what's happening, and obviously for our students. And we're also looking at curriculum renewal. And this is a continuous process. As AI capabilities change, we should be continually reviewing what we do. It shouldn't be sort of a mad panic, but it should be thoughtful and systematic, and we should be ensuring that our programs are relevant. So I've put 3 people down there. So the roadrunner is the person who's going ahead, using it without thinking what they're doing. We don't want that. We've got the ostriches who are saying, oh, it won't happen in my discipline, my students won't use it. We don't want that either. And then there are people who don't want to use it for ethical reasons, and we need to kind of have a considered conversation around that. You will be pleased to know I have looked at a whole load of national and international AI literacy frameworks, and it's very important that these inform any AI literacy course that we are developing. If too long didn't read, these are the 6 issues that I've distilled from all of these kind of international frameworks. We need to know what AI is, how to use it, the basic prompt engineering, so we're making the best of it. At all times being aware of ethical issues, critical thinking is the key skill, and then there's a discipline-specific components when you in terms you use it. So everybody's favorite slide for when I talk is the last one. So in summary, the ECIU universities are broadly aligned with our European counterparts. We're providing valuable guidelines for our members and sharing it kind of across the continent. ECIU itself, we have, because we're an innovative university, we do have innovative teaching, learning, assessment approaches. So challenge-based learning is one thing that's quite robust in the face of AI. And also we have the concept of design in, design out. So we are kind of leaders in interactive oral assessments, which are really good in the face of AI. But the job isn't finished, and we're constantly learning. We're learning from others. I say continuous monitoring of developments. And we're ready to support kind of developments across the continent, a test bed, we're a nurture platform, we share our expertise, and we are helping to build towards a European approach to AI in education. And these are my references from Unsplash. And with that, I will stop sharing and stop talking.
Thank you so
it's about
much.
On time.
Thank you so much, Monica. Excellent timing indeed. I can imagine there might be some questions, and we will postpone the questions to the end, but please use the Q&A button you have on the top of your screen to already formulate the question, and don't forget to also mention who is the speaker you want to refer your question to. So you just had Monica's reflection on the ECIU AI in education paper. If you have any questions, we will be happy to give you the floor at the end of the seminar. So that's around 1:15. So now we move from these insights to the more systemic foresight of the European Universities Association. Thomas Jorgensen, I can give the floor to you.
Yes, thank you very much, and many thanks for the invitation. It's always nice to talk about this. I'm not surprised with this many people because it's really been a revolution. I would just share a couple of slides based on our work. And let me just see. Maybe you can see them, but I can't see them. Let me just have a look.
We do see them.
You see them? Okay.
Yes.
Good. I see them as well now. So that's a big help. As Olga said, I'm Thomas Jorgensen, and I have the curious title of Director for Policy Coordination and Foresight. And I think AI belongs in both of these categories. Very shortly about EUA, if you are not familiar with us, we have about 900 members in 48 countries, so most of you will be an EUA member. We have the objectives that we facilitate dialogue. We do a lot of best practice sharing and sharing in general in higher education and research. We also have an advocacy role. And then we have a range of services. So all this you can find on our website. You can sign up to our newsletter if you're interested. And then you can see all of the things we do if you're not already familiar with them. So coming to AI. So what we observed at EUA, and this is work that's built on an expert group that we had, where we put a call out. This is something we often do. Say, if you have institutional responsibility and you work with AI, come and tell us what happens. And this is sort of the story they told us, as well as a number of webinars and online workshops. We had a whole online conference on AI as well. And let's say the story goes, you had the ChatGPT shock. So we had talked for at least 5 years about AI before this, but it was analytical AI. And suddenly you get this shock of ChatGPT that comes in and can actually do something that's very disruptive, and that we thought this was impossible. It's basically passing the Turing test. You can't tell if it's a human or machine. Coming over this shock, we saw a lot of pilots. Some at the beginning, of course, said, no, this is just, we must forbid it. I don't think anybody kept to that. So instead of saying we need to live with it, let's do some pilots. And these pilots are now developing into guidelines. I think Monica is right saying, yeah, we have policies, but they are really guidelines. We are really at the step where these have just been implemented, or just been articulated and now are going to be implemented. And I think this is, for those of us that work sort of in digital transformation, it's a very typical place to be. Often your headline is digital, but what you talk about really is change management, much more than the technicalities. And this is very much where we are. We are at a sort of a crucial point in change management, where you really risk that implementation fails, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so critical conjecture where we're at. We talked a lot about the principles, and I think it's very tempting to say AI is just another tool. So it can do good, it can do bad. It depends what you do with it. And it's to some extent true, but to some extent it's not. AI is developed in a certain value context, which is the move fast and break things. And you know this from the way AI is sold. Efficiency. You do this and it becomes much more efficiency. We boosted efficiency by 60, 80, 99%. And those are not university values. None of these. We move slow and think about things. And coming to a result fast is not in itself a value, or as one of our experts very rightly said it, efficiency is not a pedagogical goal. So you need to be aware, maybe as a first step, about what are the value gaps between the university as an institution and these technologies. And then caution against the very strong narrative, you must adapt. Disruption will come. If we don't do anything, we will perish as institutions. It's not to say disruption is not here, but it is to say, take the time and be sure what you want to do it. Align implementation with the university mission, values, and of course the ethical responsibility. And ethics is typically what people talk to first, and also policy-wise here in Brussels, ethics was one of the first things that the Commission looked at. And when you talk to people, there are things that come out again and again. Not replacing human agency, augmenting human agency. Beware of bias. There's a strong Western, Northern bias. I personally am often struck by the strong Anglophone bias. I mean, if you talk to Copilot or ChatGPT, it answers you like an American. No Scandinavian, I can tell you, would ever say that's a really great thought as the first reaction to a statement, unless it's really, really great. But it's not something we do very often. Of course, privacy. Small privacy cultural comment there in the illustration. We need to use tech we can trust. And as Monica also said, there's a compliance issue there. It needs to be legal. And then academic integrity. We often had the discussion anyway where we came to the conclusion that we don't need AI-specific research ethics, but of course we need the application of existing principles to AI. There's no AI-specific version of informed consent. The principles are the same, but you need to apply them to AI. Coming after the shock, the guidelines, we of course have this point of institutional strategies. And what we saw is, of course, that there's so much movement in this field that we still need experimentation. We still need to do these pilots about data governance, pilots that avoid that you invest in something that was actually not what you needed. And of course, not being locked in. And the big thing that Monica also said, AI literacy and training. And when you work with people, for instance, one of the things we've done in our workshops was to say, what can you do that's easy short-term and what can you do that's difficult long-term? And the easy short-term thing that people look at is AI literacy. This is really a first step across the board. Then, of course, you need to collaborate about this, break down the silos, and be sure about what are the values. We're back to both the ethics, but also countering this efficiency drive. One other chapter we have in our report is about sustainability and impact. And there's, of course, the student well-being. Is this something that learners actually contributes to their well-being? What is the cognitive impact? This we don't know really yet. There's one paper, I'm not sure it went through peer review about the cognitive impact. But we come here and I repeat the things. It's the autonomy, it's the critical thinking. It is the social interaction, very important. Very important also, we can talk about that later, for the skills needed in the workplace. One principle, no outsourcing of core academic skills. You cannot outsource critical thinking, for instance, to the machine. And then explore the potential for inclusion. Personalized learning is, of course, the big promise of AI. We haven't seen that realized really in scale, something we can discuss as well. And then, of course, social justice. Where are the global hidden costs? That's, of course, water and electricity, but there are also global hidden costs in the way that people around the world are being used to train these machines. Environmental impact, yeah, it's important. It's very difficult to actually see what has the big environmental impact. It's not something that's easily measurable, but it happens. So to sum up, adoption in universities should be deliberate. You need to know where you're going. It should, of course, be ethical and human-centered. This is not about the technology. It's about doing something for human beings. And to do that, universities must cultivate the awareness, so the AI literacy, the responsibility, shared ownership. Again, it's change management. You can't do this only top down. And then there is an elephant entering the room that we don't have time to talk about, but it's very, very important. AI Act compliance. Yes, we know the AI Act exists. We don't know how to comply with it. And that we can talk about as well in the discussion. So if you're interested in the report, you can scan the QR code. I'll put it in the chat as well. The link to it is much more in it than what I said now. I think it's a good sort of snapshot of where we are at the moment. So I hope it's interesting to read. So with those words, thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Thomas. I indeed shared the link to the EUA report in the chat, and it was also shared with you beforehand. But thank you for guiding us through it and highlighting the main conclusions. Before we move to the Q&A, so I hope you all thought of some questions, because you're all able to unmute yourself and ask the questions to the speakers after Bianca's contribution. You can also use the Q&A button we have at the top of your screen and vote in questions other participants formulated for our presenters today. But before we move to the Q&A, we will hear actually from the learner's perspective, because we discussed student well-being today, we discuss assessment, we discuss personal learning, but we should hear from the learners, the students themselves. And I'm super happy Bianca Pace is with us, representing the European Students' Union. And the European Students' Union is actually working, I've heard, on a statement on AI and digitalization. So we will share this statement. It's not out yet, but we will share this with all of you once it's out. But Bianca, maybe you can already share with us some reflections from the learner's perspective. Thank you.
So hi, good morning, everyone. Like Olga said, my name is Bianca. I'm from Malta, and I am a Bachelor of Laws student and the Human Rights and Organizational Development Coordinator for ECIU. And before I go any further, I'm going to share my screen and hope it works. Okay, can you see my screen?
We see your slide, yes.
Perfect. So as Olga mentioned, we do have a statement coming up on AI and digitalization, which will be voted on actually in around a week and a half, because we have our biannual board meeting where our board members will be voting on the policy paper, which will then be able to disseminate with you. And I would like to start by actually giving you a bit of a rundown of what ESU is. So the European Students' Union is an umbrella organization of 43 national unions of students coming from 40 countries, representing almost 20 million students across Europe. That being said, in some countries, we have more than one national student union. So for example, in Finland, we have an applied sciences union, which is also a board member. So in certain instances, we do have more specific representation as well. And our aim is mostly advocacy work based on educational, social, economic, and cultural aspects of the higher education area across Europe. So, as was mentioned, today I will be speaking to you a bit about the student experience, which from our perspective comes again from the data collected for the policy paper. So everything that I'll be presenting to you today comes from the statement itself, and then once we will share it with you, it will just be in a more formalized format. But from our perspective, currently we are in a massive gray area when it comes to the use of AI in higher education, because we believe that neither students nor universities, for the most part, have clear shared rules about what is allowed and what isn't. And as was mentioned by the previous speakers, there is this problem of implementation and compliance, which we feel is very, very strong and felt, unfortunately, to the disadvantage of students more often than not. And because the technology is moving faster than university policy, student experiences are completely fragmented depending on where you study and what you study. So if we take, for instance, an example of two students who are taking the exact same course but at different universities, one student might use AI safely to get ideas for prompts or to organize their thoughts if they're creating a presentation or an assignment, whilst another student might use AI in the exact same way and face severe penalties or even fail because the university has a different or unclear policy, which we believe is not fair. It creates massive confusion, and it means that your educational experience depends entirely on which university or department you are in and what policies they have in place at that moment in time. So at this point in time, we feel that technology has progressed so much that universities at this point are purely trying to keep up and are acting in a reactive manner. So we are in a situation where universities can no longer just react to things that are happening. And at the moment, most institutions are just using temporary short-term rules, which then risk creating shifting responsibility onto individual students and teachers because there isn't any profound structural regulations in place that cater for any and all kinds of situations and use of AI. So we think that this reactive approach tends to create a certain amount of chaos. And we are at a point where we cannot just wait and see what happens, but we need to start becoming proactive. Because if we continue moving at the same pace and in the same style, we fear that we will lose control of how these tools are used, and it will create a greater fear of abuse and more confusion and disharmonization between the use of students and how it is perceived by lecturers and university institutions. And when such things are unregulated, we think that this creates a domino effect of problems, which affect the entire university ecosystem. So one of the main areas that we feel AI is slightly problematic and is not being regulated properly at the moment and is creating problems is the impact it has on admissions and appeal procedures. So it's a known fact that AI is increasingly being used behind the scenes for university admissions and um, uh, getting through the selection process in universities. And when software and algorithms are used together, either to grade or to filter applications, there is, we fear, a great risk of bias and discrimination. And not only is there this bias and discrimination, but we do fear that there is a certain misconception that um, uh, leaving stuff up to AI means that it is without fault and that it is purely humans that make mistakes. But in reality, we don't think that this is the case at all, because ultimately biases are implemented through what the AI is fed from humans. So we think that this makes it very hard for students to appeal to certain decisions that are made by AI, because there is this conceptual there's this concept that AI is correct most of the time. And we fear that, when an AI system rejects your application and there is no human oversight, it makes it very, very unclear where the student stands, and it makes it very difficult to appeal, which ultimately impinges on students' rights in general. So as part of our advocacy, as I mentioned before, we continue obviously to push for more education and more awareness in a lot of different sectors, but very, very specifically on AI and digital literacy. So the root of the problem is a clear lack of digital literacy for both students and staff, which unfortunately tends to create a vicious cycle between who knows least about the topic and generating even more confusion about its use. And we think that universities cannot set good standards unless they have um, guidelines. Students don't know how to use AI properly because staff often don't understand the current state of AI or the ethics behind it. Since it is developing at such a fast rate, it is very, very difficult to keep up with everything. And so we are always, as I mentioned, catching up to what has already happened. And again, it creates this constant loop of confusion. And while we don't agree that, while we're not completely against the use of AI, the general the general perspective that we take as ESU is that we are cautiously pro AI, telling students to use AI regardless. Sorry, not regardless. We cautiously use AI in a balanced way. So we want students to be able to use AI because they know how to use AI, because they have been taught how to use AI, because they can understand its limitations, and they know where it is beneficial for their education, and to know when critical thinking is to be applied, and that AI is purely there as an assistant and not there to study and to do your academic, to do your education for you. So to solve this this problem, we need to change how we talk about AI. We cannot continue looking at it through one narrow lens of purely looking at it through cheating or plagiarism detection, because AI at the end of the day affects everything in our studies. This is why we are pushing for a more umbrella approach. This means that when universities sit down to discuss AI, they must look at all the related topics at the same time: how it affects the grading, the data privacy, students' rights, and the quality of the course itself. Because if we only stick to cheating rules, which have been there for years, we are ignoring who owns the student data, and we haven't really solved the root of the problem, um, which is that we are now faced with a reality which is entirely different than when cheating and plagiarism rules were first introduced. And so it is time, obviously, to re-regulate. So this brings us to our major concern, as also laid out in our statement, on data privacy and the commercialization of education. So as universities continue to progress and to buy AI platforms, there is a general question as to what happens to student data. Um, uh, we fear that private tech companies continue to get access to amounts of student data and essays and projects, and there is a lack of regulation, we fear, as to how this intellectual property is handled, who owns it clearly, and the protections the students have against private companies on their public works, and on their educational material as a whole. So again, in light of this ever-changing and ever-evolving scenario that we're faced with, we also believe that we need to rethink the way that students are examined. Traditional exams that just ask students to repeat memorized facts do not work well in a world of AI where you can look up something and instantly get all the information right there, right in front of you. And we do think that in more courses than others, there needs to be this shift towards pushing for more critical thinking methods of assessment. The solution is the solution ultimately is not to distrust students, but to give them the tools that in this day and age are more applicable to the resources that they have in hand. And unfortunately, many universities continue to base their surveillance on unreliable AI detection software or use invasive online proctoring tools, which once again destroys the trust between students and teachers. And instead of wasting time trying to catch students using AI, we feel that universities should design assessments that focus more, again, on critical thinking and human discussion as more as the more critical point of the assessment rather than the actual black on white knowledge that is being taught. As was mentioned before as well, another important point is obviously sustainability. AI technology, again, requires a massive amount of energy and water to run the data centers. And we do want to push for better use of digital platforms. And through more training and through proper digital literacy, we also want to push for more responsible use of AI and kind of building this idea that AI is there to add value to the learning and not to complete every minor task for you, but to act as an accessory to boost your knowledge and to boost your education. So to sum up, because I've been speaking for a while now, banning AI or pretending that it doesn't exist does not solve anything. And from what Thomas and from what Monica have said earlier, we are definitely not pretending that it doesn't exist anymore and that it has not infiltrated the higher education system, because it has. And students are using it and they will continue to use it. So we need clear and fair rules at every single level, from individual universities to national governments, in a more harmonized and holistic manner, and not as fragmented as it is currently. And most importantly, and this is something that we see in every presentation that we do, is that students must always be included in the rules that are being written. At the end of the day, we are the ones that are experiencing these changes, and decisions shouldn't be made by administrators alone behind closed doors. We want a future where technology supports learning, that it respects our privacy, that it protects our rights, and that it is built with students, not just for us, because ultimately, and at the end of the day, we are all working in one holistic university ecosystem. And what is beneficial for us as students at the end of the day is also beneficial for our electorate, administration, and higher education in general. And that's yes. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering any questions that you may have as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bianca. You make it very clear how urgent the topic is and how timely this webinar is organized. We're so happy to bring higher education experts from all over Europe together to hear your plea that we really need to take action now. So with your final words, we've come to the end of the presentation, and we will move now to the Q&A session. I don't see any questions yet that have not been answered, because there was one question on AI literacy frameworks from Gabia, but that one was answered by Monica. So if any of you have any questions to Thomas about the foresight perspective, to Monica about the ECIU paper, or to the Bianca about the learner's perspective, please raise your hand and we will give you the floor. I know it's always easy to be the first one and to break the ice, but now I can always trust in you. Please go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you.
Yeah, my question is for Bianca, actually. And Bianca, is there concrete evidence of any kind of use of AI to favor students, or purposefully or even unpurposefully? Is there evidence, or is that just a threat that you mentioned? When it comes to admissions, sorry, I should have mentioned when it comes to admissions.
To admissions. The data that we have, so full transparency, I wasn't the one who was leading the work on the statement on AI, but my colleague couldn't make it today, so I'm kind of representing her. But the data that we collected was from a task force, which was comprised of students from our board, who came up with this statement and all the data that we had in it. So I believe that there is evidence which shows as such, but I'll be able to give you a bit more of a concrete answer when I have the statement in hand, and there will be data in it which will be able to see as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca. I think already the risk is very important to be aware of, but data would even be more useful to activate our communities and to act upon this, because that's absolutely crucial. We cannot have an admission bias or discrimination and all the risks that you highlighted in the presentation. Then I move to Pavel. You also have a question for one of our speakers.
Yes, hello everyone. Do you hear me, I hope? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so my general comment is very important discussion, I think. And thank you very much for your thoughtful presentations. And maybe I don't have any specific question, but I have a general, how to say, comment, and maybe I would like to highlight some urgent steps we should undertake. Of course, AI revolution, which is, in my personal view, another industrial revolution, which took us by surprise, because earlier revolutions we had in centuries, decades. Now we have years or even months. New AI tools occur every month, every week even. So there is what I liked about Bianca's presentation, a very large gap between the literacy of AI and digital literacy. So the problem is that teachers who should move from just transmitting information to mentorship, critical thinking, and practical study model, they are not aware what are the capabilities and threats of using AI tools. Maybe within the ECIU, we could think about kind of workshop that will be, a common effort of our universities to prepare some kind of good step-by-step mentoring or introduction to using AI within universities. I am coming from the electrical engineering and computer science department. So as I see, my colleagues are quite fluent in it, but at other departments like chemistry, biomedicine, and so on, or even humanistic studies, the knowledge is really very poor. So how we can think about reforming teaching programs, adapting them to AI, if the personnel and teaching staff is not really competent in doing this? So there is a big gap and urgent need for such a workshop that will elevate, improve the knowledge of teachers and staff about using Gen AI in a thoughtful way. That's my comment, and maybe I don't expect answers, but I think there is an urgent need for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Pavel. I think indeed you highlight a very crucial aspect, that there's a huge variety among disciplines. This is also discussed in the Clarinet expert group. Monica, I don't know if you want to reflect on Pavel's comment.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, as Thomas nicely captured as well, there was the shock at the beginning. We've kind of learned how somewhat to do with assessments, although we can talk about that as well. But like the AI literacy piece is critical. And as a colleague said, it's not like COVID, you couldn't ignore what was happening. Here, people can kind of think, oh, I'm just fed up of hearing about AI, I don't want to do anything else. But it's really important that we bring people with it. That continuous education piece is very important. And as you know, just because somebody knows AI technically doesn't mean they know how to use it pedagogically. So there's a lot of things to consider. And I do think it's like we need to be encouraging people to stay up still, to keep reading, because some people say, you know, their knowledge is frozen maybe in 2 years ago when AI didn't have the capability to do something, and now can do something that they thought it couldn't do, and they've redesigned their assessment with the old version of AI. But it's not that, and just this is a secret I'm going to tell everybody, like academics aren't actually lazy. You know, we actually do loads of work apart from teaching, and it's not that people, you know, just, oh, I couldn't be bothered. You know, they have a lot going on. So I think we should make it as, one of my general philosophies is to make it easy for people to do the right thing. But we're all learning. And like one of the nice things about the ECIU Clarinet group is that we have experts from different areas. So we have people from the humanities, from, you know, pedagogy, technical people. So it's great to share that expertise, and multidisciplinary is really important because we hear about the issues from different perspectives. So thanks very much, Pavel, for that contribution.
Maybe a small comment. It's moving so fast that if we won't jump onto this train now, it will be accelerating, because I expect really explosive kind of evolution of AI technologies. We have to really react fast. Thank you.
And I would just kind of finish that off by saying, you know, a lot of people acknowledge that we made a lot of mistakes in kind of the free rein that we gave to social media. So we kind of, now is the time where we can kind of put some kind of guardrails and certain shape on it, because like we as adults have had the, you know, we've learned how to think critical, survive without AI. It's the up and coming students that we really need to think of.
Thank you.
Thank you. I also see a question coming in through the Q&A tool of Teams. So you see the Q&A button on the top of your screen. Jose Riega Cayetano from Tampere University, an ECIU partner, has a question for Thomas. Jose, you might want to ask the question yourself.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the presentations. And yeah, my question was about specifically the current state that we are going from the guidelines to the implementation. So I wanted to know, maybe Thomas and also Monica, if you have come across specific mechanisms that can help universities to make this transition without creating excessive administrative burden. And of course, coming from home, I made the example of Tampere University, that through this AI policy that they have published and implemented, or well, they are implementing it, there are structures such as operational AI groups, there are clear definition of the roles, and there are documentation templates. So I would like to know if you have come across with something else, or what else is needed to make this implementation work in practice. Thank you so much.
I'm super happy about that question. I can speak forever. No, what I think you point to something that's quite important, and I think that really has happened in universities. When we set up our expert group, and that's about 2 years ago, we had a usual formula. You know, you need to have some kind of institutional responsibility, and by that we usually mean you need to be a vice rector or something like this at that level. But that's not what we got. We got the sometimes associate professor, but head of the AI task force. So many universities actually did what I understand also what you did in Tampere, was to say, we cannot deal with this through our traditional hierarchies where we have the vice rector for research and the vice rector for learning and teaching. We need to set up some kind of other structure. And I think that happened a lot of places. And it's probably the right thing to do, to set up a task force with people that have knowledge and literacy, but also I think that goes for everything. We're back to change management again, to really design a process that is inclusive, and of course, yes, the learners, but also the academic staff and the admin staff, and see what are the promises of this technology. I think that's, and a team like this today, I'll just repeat that, needs to have some kind of legal advice. So what can we do? What is legal? For instance, what we saw in terms of this admission system, that's not legal. That's not AI compliant at all. So if that happens, that needs to be dismantled. I'm pretty sure. So yes, we've seen a little bit of a revolution in this, and I hope these task forces have also been able to really have a process that's very, very inclusive, because otherwise, this will just be, as you say, excessive administrative burden without any real cultural change.
And just to follow up there, so like Tampere is actually one of our leading lights in the ECIU in terms of AI in education. You have your AI strategy. We've UHA, who is part of this group. So it's good for us to see, good examples of what's working in practice. And I mean, if we can come up with a template that was great that everybody else can copy, but I think people are still finding a way. But I think that idea of having expertise, and I think it should be multidisciplinary expertise. It shouldn't just be the technical people who kind of know what's under the hood, because it should be always pedagogically driven. And you mentioned something, Thomas, that's important. So like we're always talking about teaching, learning, assessment, but I think that, and I mentioned it in the talk, about the professional staff are very worried about their position. They think their jobs are all going to be outsourced, but they're always going to be the human in the workflow process. And also for senior management, I think we need to support them more, because they're not AI experts and it's very hard for them to make decisions. So there are two kind of things that, two other things that are keeping me awake at night as well, but positively so.
Thank you, Monica. I hope you still also get some sleep at night, but thanks for your reflections. I don't see any hands raised right now, but some of you also shared some questions beforehand. And I'd like to bring one of those questions forward, because I think it's very valid. Monica, this one is for you. How can AI tools be used to enhance active learning and student engagement, especially in project-based courses?
Okay, great. So one approach that people use is to have AI as a partner if you're doing in a team or whatever. So in the ECIU, we're strong advocates of challenge-based learning, and challenge-based learning is it's a real world problem, often based on a sustainable development goal, and seeing how technology can improve that. So AI can be used at various waypoints throughout the process for, maybe summarizing kind of policy statements, clarifying student understanding. But at all times, the student has to relate it to the problem that they're doing, so their specific interest and focus. So the idea is that it can support the learning, help the learning, but at the end of the day, the student is the one who has to kind of parse all that knowledge in their head and come up with a kind of coherent solution to what they're addressing. Another thing that I've seen that is quite interesting, using a debate as a way of using an AI tool in a Socratic method. So instead of saying, tell me about sustainable SDG 4, which is on quality education, the AI tool would say, well, what do you know already, or what part do you want to know, or what do you think? So, not outsourcing the learning, but using it in a Socratic method kind of question and answer. Another way is to use it kind of people talk about cognitive offloading. So you outsource all your thinking to the AI tool, but actually if you do structured offloading, so you are consciously deciding, I am using the AI tool to do this, but this is what I'll actually use it for myself. So all the time the student's using it, what AI is good for, but not using it for what AI is bad for. So we don't want to use it for bypassing learning or anything like that. And I think, over the since November 22, we're coming up with good case uses of AI, and I think we'll find some sweet spots where it can work well. So one of the things that works in the administrative thing, if you have a chatbot specifically directed at your course materials, it can say, when is that assessment due, or what did she say was about X, Y, Z? So there are some good use cases that we can kind of maybe stand over and share more widely, but also things that people need to avoid. I don't know if that answered the question, but that's just some thoughts.
I think it's very inspirational to also hear a little bit about the opportunities of using AI in your pedagogies. Thank you.
And one other thing that I would mention, sorry, I'm just looking at my list here, is obviously be a little bit skeptical about what it produces. And it's really good for self-assessment. So if you have a university authorized tool, which is really important, so addresses some of the concerns that Bianca mentioned, that you can use it within the safeguards of the university. Your information isn't being shared outside. It's not being used for training. I think that's really important for institutions to have. You can ask it to generate self-assessment quizzes for you on a particular material, and they're very effective for students. So I would encourage that. And then one other thing that people generally don't mention about an AI tool is that it can be useful for shame reduction. So if I'm on an economics course and it's talking about macroeconomics and microeconomics, and I wouldn't put my hand up in a 400 lectures here and say, excuse me, I don't understand the difference between those two things. But if you can ask an AI tool, I don't understand the difference. What is the difference? And if it's in a Socratic method, say, well, what one do you know already, or how do you know it, and whatever. So just some thoughts there.
Thank you, Monica. We are approaching the end of the webinar, so we have still 5 minutes left. So I don't see any hands raised at this stage, which means I also.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, no, I was just looking through the questions, Olga. And there's one there, how will the role of the lecturer change if AI can personalize learning better than humans? So I think, the short answer is that we are going to guide our students rather than kind of just impart information. But anybody who's kind of been involved in improving kind of education over the last X period of time, that just the transmission model of education doesn't work. It's really boring for the students, but it's also boring for the lecturer. So, we should be constantly updating our teaching practices to make it more beneficial for the students. And if there are things that AI is better at, use the time for that, but really maximize the time that have the students physically with you, that use active learning strategies and be really careful to cultivate kind of social interaction in the classroom. And I'll hand over to Thomas.
Yes, because this is a lovely question for somebody who's interested in the future. I mean, if we take this, we don't think about what better means. We just think this is better at everything for everyone. Then we have a teacher avatar which is better than anything else. And the only thing you need to feed that avatar is the learning outcomes. So in that future, the whole discussion is what are the learning outcomes? And then you'd have an avatar that maybe has 10 different learning styles or teaching styles, and it's much better than any human. You would go a step further and say, well, we feed this avatar with labor market intelligence, and that then decides the learning outcomes. And then you have a fully closed technical loop of the better avatar. Maybe not the best future, but these are the kind of future. And I just say that what the colleague from Poland said, very true. This goes very fast. We have to think of these extreme scenarios. Say, okay, what do we need to preserve here? And that future, there's signals for that everywhere. It's not far-fetched at all.
Thank you, Thomas. Let's touch base very soon again to see how the future looks like and predict more the future from there. There's another question actually in the chat, building up on what Bianca mentioned on the need for European-wide fair guidelines to assimilate student experiences. And Bianca, I will come back to you a little bit later on this, because I also understood your plea also for a plea for European action. But then we also wonder how to marry this with the need with a pilot approach that rather needs more time for experiments with individual institutions. This question is from Yannis Nolt to you, Thomas. Can you say some words about this?
I mean, there will be European action, and it was supposed to come in February. We're supposed to have guidelines for implementation of the AI Act in education. It's classified as a high risk use of AI. So there's a lot of things you need to do, and it was exactly the things that Bianca actually alluded to in this admissions case. The problem is that politically the European Commission has turned from regulation is good to regulation is bad, and tried to simplify or deregulate parts of AI, and education has fallen into that hole. So they are completely quiet about education, but this will happen. It's just going slowly. We will have EU guidelines. We will have an implementation. We will have practices, and in 5 years from now, I think we'll be much wiser. But 5 years is, of course, a long time in the world of AI.
Thank you, Thomas. And also looking at student journey, 5 years is very long. Thank you for reflecting. Bianca, then maybe the final question to you. I interpreted your contribution as a call for EU level action, but is my interpretation right? And what is very much needed maybe now from the side of the European Commission? Do you want to push them for such guidelines? Can you share from a student perspective, what is the most urgent now?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I mean, obviously us as ESU, we work on mostly on the European level. So engaging with the Commission and mostly working also with the Bologna follow-up group. So that is our main target audience. And as I mentioned in the presentation, we want to be involved in the discussions. We want to be involved in the drafting of regulations and the drafting of guidelines. So and obviously everything that comes out of the EU and at the EU level has a trickle-down approach. So obviously our target is to push them to give us guidelines and for us to implement them and to disseminate amongst our board members, advocating for them and encouraging them to push their national institutions to apply them more rigorously and to make regulations which are more favorable for students. So I think that's the kind of approach that I was referring to. So targeting the EU to then, by correlation, getting everything else that we need to have a holistic and more structured regulation to AI in higher education.
Thank you so much for sharing. Then my key takeaway from today's session is it is very timely to discuss AI in education. There's a need for more clarity, also equality among higher education institutions in Europe, and the developments go very far, but we shouldn't be reactive, we should be proactive, forward thinking. So I want to warmly thank our speakers of today, the contributors, Monica Ward, the chair of the ECIU Clarinet group from Dublin City University, Thomas Jorgensen, director for policy coordination and foresight, and Bianca Pace from the European Students' Union. Thank you so much. This is not the end. Let's say this is only the start, and there will be follow-ups for sure. We expect EU-level action. There's a higher education package expected in November this year, including a 2030 digital education plan. So we will forward all the outcomes of today's sessions with the colleagues from the European Commission, and we look forward to staying in touch with you. If you have any further reflections on the ECIU paper or the EUA report, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We will share the slides and the recording with all of you after the issue statement is out. So Bianca, we are waiting for your publication, and as soon as the link is available, we will share all the materials with all the registered participants. Thank you so much to all of you for your engagement today. I don't know, Bianca, Monica, Thomas, if you have any final words before we close the session. I don't see. No, we've said it all for today. Then I wish you a good lunch break and a very good continuation of your working week. Thank you so much.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Thank you.